36년간이 그 연장이 되어서 10년만 돼도 대한민국 가는 거는 해본 거예요.
A nation's identity resides in its language, a vessel for its culture, history, and spirit. Amid globalization and assimilation, almost half of the world's languages are now at risk of extinction. Preservation of these languages is essential not only as a cultural right, but as a generational responsibility. At the turn of the 20th century, the world's imperial powers sought to colonize smaller nations into vast empires. In the Far East, the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty of 1910 specifically targeted the Korean language to assimilate Korea into Japanese society. In resistance, a small group of scholars formed the Korean Language Society and fought for the right to their language and took on the responsibility of preserving it. Guided by the vision of founder Chu Shi-kyung, the society took its first major step in 1913 by officially naming the Korean script as Hangul, meaning our nation's language.
주시경 선생님이란 뛰어난 스승님이 있었고 그 스승으로부터 이제 교육을 많이 받은 몇 명의 제자들이 정말 뜻을 합쳐서 조선어학회에서 이제 우리말과 글을 백성들한테 가르치고 이제 지켜나가기 위해서 노력을 했고 거기에 가장 결정적인 게 우리말 사전을 자체적으로 만들어야 되겠다. 그 사전 작업에 몰두하게 되죠.
This marked the beginning of the society's mission to standardize and protect the Korean language as a cornerstone of national identity. This is their story, a story of defiance, sacrifice, and the unyielding commitment of a people silenced but never defeated. From Japan's perspective, their efforts were righteous, benefiting and civilizing Korea. Similar to the British colonization of India and America's conquest of Native Americans, Japan argued that it brought culture, education, and prosperity to a primitive society.
In 1920s and 30s, they began to educate Japanese language to people in Korea because Korean population had to be integrated into Japanese nation. And that way, they really tried to educate Japanese language to Korean people.
Colonial textbooks pushed Korean students to adopt Japanese ideologies and trust officials masking imperial control as cooperation fueling Korean resistance. In 1919, a decade into the Japanese colonization of Korea, 2 million Koreans took to the streets to fight for their rights, for their independence, and their identity. Koreans fought with their voices in this event, known as the March First movement. Japan responded with bullets, bayonets, and batons. By nightfall, over 60,000 lay dead, wounded, or hauled away in chains. News of the violent suppression spread, and Japan faced mounting pressure to portray itself as a benevolent force while still maintaining absolute control over Korea. As a result, Japan required all Koreans to learn and speak Japanese and to stop using Hangul. In 1922, Japanese was legalized as the primary language in Korea. All media, legal proceedings, communications, and education were required to be in Japanese.
쉬는 시간에도 한국말을 쓰면 안 되지. 잠깐 말해도 혼나고 내까지 만난 친구들을 보면서 나는 말할 용기도 못 내고 늘 조용히 숨죽였단다.
The effects were devastating and threatened to extinguish the very soul of the Korean people as Koreans began to lose their language and their culture. This fresh affront reinvigorated the Korean Language Society and their sacred patriotic duty to protect Hangul. Understanding that resistance is not always loud and that defiance is sometimes the quiet act of preserving what others seek to erase, the Korean Language Society's next step was to unify and codify the 12 distinct dialects of the Korean language. From 1930 to 1933, they organized underground language seminars across the peninsula. 5,000 Koreans collected dialects, idioms, and colloquialisms from their villages. This led to the creation of the first ever Korean National Dictionary, which contained over 160,000 entries and established the Korean Spelling Unification Plan.
One major project for them was to standardize the spelling, to come up with a logical, agreed upon spelling. And you may think, oh, spelling, what does it matter? It's just spelling. But there were very important linguistic theories behind it. And these were very accomplished scholars. And they made painstaking efforts to get this consensus on how to properly express the Korean language.
In each recorded word and every standardized rule, they were not only fulfilling their responsibility, but also establishing the rights of a free and independent Korea. However, as the march towards World War II advanced, Japan exerted more control and tightened its grip on Korea, driving Hangul to the brink of extinction. In 1938, ordinances were passed with a singular purpose: assimilation of Koreans into Japanese society through a complete erasure of Korean identity. Koreans were required to adopt Japanese names. The Japanese called it the gift of civilization. To keep the flame of the Korean language alight in its darkest hour, the Korean Language Society decided to blatantly defy Japanese laws at the risk of their own lives and to teach their outlawed language to Koreans by hosting underground lectures.
여러분도 따라 읽으십시오. 소, 소나무, 버드나무, 두루미.
With the Korean dictionary as a fragile candle in the wind, they spread out to all the corners of the peninsula to illuminate the minds and hearts of their fellow citizens with hope, and with Hangul. However, in October 1942, the society's quiet resistance came crashing down. A young girl who had been secretly learning Korean through the society's night classes was overheard speaking Korean by a Japanese informant. She was interrogated by imperialist authorities until she revealed the name of her teacher, a member of the Korean Language Society. The Japanese police stormed their headquarters, arrested society members, and seized 46,000 pages of irreplaceable research to be used as evidence in court. Awaiting trial, scholars, whose only crime was teaching their language, were subjected to relentless torture. For 3 years they endured. 2 of them didn't make it out alive. Their sacrifices affirmed that to them, the responsibility to protect one's language is worth any cost, even life itself. Then, on the brink of extinction, hope returned. On August 15, 1945, the Japanese emperor surrendered to the Allied forces. Korea was liberated, and all society members who remained alive were freed. Miraculously, the 46,000 pages of research that have been preserved as evidence were found in a nondescript train car at Seoul Station. The society's work had survived. Working alongside the newly established Korean government, the society passed several measures that promoted and preserved the Korean language. Hangul was established as a cultural cornerstone for all Korean communications through laws such as the Billboard Act, which directed Koreans to replace foreign language signs and billboards with ones displaying Hangul.
그다음에도 자기 말을 자기 글로 적을 줄을 모르는 거예요. 그 문맹률이 굉장히 높았다고 해요. 그런데 조선어학회에서는 그 당시 미리 만들어 두었던 표준어 규정이나 이런 걸 통해 가지고 굉장히 그 빠른 속도로 그 학생들을 위한 교과서를 만들 수 있었어요.
In the succeeding decades, secondary education in Korea would increase from 0.9% to 94.5%. Today, literacy in Korea approaches 100%, and the Korean language is celebrated worldwide. Without the Korean Language Society's efforts to save Hangul, the world would have been deprived of significant creative contributions, from a Nobel-winning Korean novel to the first non-English film winning the Academy Award for Best Picture, to Korean series breaking records at the Emmys, along with many other accomplishments that have brought Hangul to the forefront of popular culture. The Korean Language Society's victory did not just belong to Korea. It became a blueprint for a cultural survival around the world. The Korean Language Society understood that preserving a language is preserving its people. This idea has now spread to endangered voices across the globe and is encouraging indigenous communities to preserve their own threatened languages. Still operating today, the Korean Language Society inspires and helps tribes in Indonesia, Thailand, Bolivia, and the Congo, utilizing Hangul as a writing system to preserve their own non-written languages.
Melafalkan pengucapan pa, saya belajar itu huruf pa dengan da. Jadi itu atau da itu belum ada semacam, tapi kemudian setelah tapi kalau misalnya hanya secara lisan.
And still today, worldwide struggles of marginalized cultures against the suppression and the threat of linguistic extinction continue. Now, as always, language is more than just a right. It's a responsibility worth fighting for.
그 민족이 자기 말을 하고 자기 글을 쓰는 것은 기본적인 인간의 권리인데 그것을 지키기 위해서 조선어학회는 이제 집중적으로 말과 글의 문제를 지켜서 독립을 쟁취할 수 있는 그런 노력을 했던 거죠.
When the right to their language was threatened, the Korean Language Society's tireless dedication to saving Hangul was a profound act of responsibility. Today, every syllable of Hangul is a heartbeat, every written word a testament. and every spoken phrase a triumph over silence.